Before we begin, I want you to take a moment. Breathe deeply, because what I'm about to share isn't just another story, or a theory, or some exaggerated prediction. It's the result of months, maybe years, of noticing signals that, on their own, seemed like random noise, but together form a pattern that's impossible to ignore. Maybe you're someone who believes that the people who've made it to the top, entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, leaders, have everything under control. That those who build the future understand the present better than anyone else. I used to believe that too, until I realized the future we're building might not be the one we think it is. For months, I've spent sleepless nights wondering if I should record this. Because what I've discovered changes how you see what's coming, not in a catastrophic way, but in a deeply human one. The kind of truth that forces you to rethink what security means, what work means, what purpose means, what reality means, and maybe most importantly, what it truly means to be prepared. The turning point came when I started noticing something strange in the information circulating among governments, tech companies, and financial institutions. It wasn't a leak, it was something subtler, a quiet alignment. Decisions, contracts, discrete adjustments in policies and budgets that, at first glance, looked like nothing more than administrative updates. But there was a pattern. Everything was being moved forward. Projects scheduled for next year were suddenly being accelerated. Investments were being redirected. Entire departments were being restructured. Long-term plans were quietly replaced with emergency plans, and no one was saying why. That's when I realized what's coming isn't a single event. It's a global transition, not a collapse, but a shift, a silent change that's already underway. And most people won't notice it until it's too late. For years, we believed that stability was the norm and crisis was the exception. But what if it's the other way around? What if we're entering an era where constant change becomes the new normal and stability a rare pause in between? Those questions started haunting me. I stopped sleeping well. I began digging into reports, scientific papers, consumption patterns, leadership behavior, and even public and private data flows. And slowly, everything started pointing in the same direction. We are about to face a simultaneous transformation: economic, technological, and psychological. And there's no manual for that. I'm not talking about crises we've seen before. It's not just inflation, unemployment, or political instability. It's something deeper, a redefinition of value. What your time is worth, what your work is worth, what your knowledge is worth, all of it is being rewritten right now while you're listening. The signs are there, but most people aren't connecting the dots. Automation is eliminating roles faster than any industrial revolution in history. Production chains are becoming so dependent on algorithms that a single technical failure could freeze entire economies. And perhaps most important of all, human attention, our most precious resource, is running out. The world has learned how to compete for our minds, and the result is that almost no one can tell anymore what's information and what's manipulation. I've seen behavioral analytics data showing that, on average, an adult's focused attention span in 2024 dropped below 47 seconds. That means before you can fully process an idea, your brain is already being pulled in another direction. Now imagine an entire society trying to make complex decisions based on fragmented information under constant distraction. That's the ground on which the future is being built. And that's why I had to record this. Because while most people are focused on visible crises, wars, elections, natural disasters, the real transformation is happening in the silence of data, in the way algorithms rewrite behavior, in the way the economy reorganizes itself around human predictability. Here's what kept me awake at night. There's a quiet consensus among governments and corporations that the current consumer society model isn't sustainable through the end of this decade. They know it, and they're preparing. But ordinary people aren't. There's an implicit plan, not a conspiracy, but a strategy to redirect collective behavior. It's not about direct control. It's about expectation management. Controlling information is hard, but controlling what people expect from the future? That's incredibly effective. That's why you won't see public announcements about what's happening. You'll see distractions, entertainment, polarized narratives. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the world is being reorganized to operate with less predictability, less stability, and less dependence on human input. And here's the detail that bothers me most. This isn't fiction. It's not theory. It's planning. In the next few years, power won't lie with those who produce, but with those who can shape collective perception. And if that sounds exaggerated, remember this. Every technological revolution sounds exaggerated until it becomes inevitable. I'm not saying this to create fear. I'm saying it because there's still time to prepare, mentally, emotionally, practically. But to do that, we have to face an uncomfortable truth. Most people aren't ready to live in a world that changes faster than they can understand it. When I realized the scale of what was unfolding, my first reaction was silence. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say, but the silence of someone who understands that some truths, when spoken too soon, can create panic instead of preparation. For weeks, I tried to find a way to translate what I was seeing without sounding alarmist. Because what I discovered isn't about the end of the world, but the end of a kind of world. The one that believed progress would always bring comfort, and that technology would solve our problems faster than it created them. But now, the curves are reversing. For the first time, the complexity of the systems we've built is growing faster than our ability to understand them. And when a system becomes too complex, even for its creators to grasp, the risk isn't immediate collapse, it's silent collapse. You don't see it, you feel it. Small things that stop working the way they used to. Services that take longer. Products disappearing for logistical reasons. Behavioral patterns subtly shifting until you adapt to the new normal and forget how things once were. That's how history changes now. Not with explosions, but with gradual erosion. And what worries me most isn't the economic impact, it's the psychological one. Because when the emotional foundation of a society starts to crack, nothing external can hold it together. I've seen internal reports from tech companies showing skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout among young professionals. Mental exhaustion is surpassing post-war levels. And that's not a coincidence, it's a consequence. We've built a system that demands constant attention but offers minimal stability in return. And in that kind of environment, people stop planning for the future. They stop dreaming, investing, committing, because deep down they begin to doubt that tomorrow will look anything like today. That's the invisible transformation happening right now, the collapse of predictability. And it's not being caused by a single government, company, or ideology. It's caused by the acceleration of reality itself. Economic, political, and technological cycles are now overlapping at a pace the human brain wasn't designed to handle. Have you noticed how the last few years felt like an entire decade? How events that would have once defined generations now vanish from public conversation within weeks? That's not just information overload. It's the erosion of meaning. And that's the most fertile ground for what comes next. In the coming months, we'll see a subtle but decisive transition. The world's most powerful institutions are shifting from predictability to adaptability. That means the focus will no longer be on ensuring stability, but on making sure people can adapt quickly to instability. The problem is, we were never trained for that. School taught obedience, not flexibility. Work taught routine, not reinvention. Culture taught consumption, not purpose. And now, suddenly, we're expected to become what the system always tried to avoid: autonomous, critical, emotionally resilient beings. But that autonomy comes at a price. It means losing certainty. It means admitting that no one is fully in control. I've spoken with analysts, engineers, psychologists, and all of them, in their own fields, describe the same feeling: something is shifting layers. It's not just technology evolving, it's the very definition of human becoming blurry. With artificial intelligence, we're not only outsourcing tasks anymore, we're outsourcing decisions. We delegate ethical judgments, aesthetic choices, moral interpretations. And the more we do that, the thinner the line between creator and creation becomes, until it disappears altogether. When I say the greatest risk of 2025 isn't material but psychological, this is what I mean. It's the transition from a world that used machines as tools to one that needs machines to understand itself. Think about it. If the major recommendation systems, the platforms that filter what you see, read, and believe, were to go offline for 48 hours, billions of people would feel lost, not just without entertainment, but without a sense of reality. And that's where the real inflection point lies. The crisis isn't one of energy or resources, it's a crisis of perception, and it's already begun. In recent months, global behavioral data has revealed something more alarming than any financial index, a growing sense of collective unreality. People reporting that life feels like a dream, that time seems to be speeding up, that nothing feels fully real. It's not mysticism, it's measurable. It's a human response to an environment where the volume of change exceeds our capacity for emotional adaptation. And when that happens, the mind looks for shelter. Some turn to spirituality, others to conspiracy theories, others to endless distraction. All of them searching, in their own way, for a sense of control. But control is becoming the scarcest resource of the modern world. That's why this message exists. Because there's still something we can do, not to control the world, but to relearn how to respond to it consciously. And that may be the only preparation that truly matters. I remember the night I realized this. It was almost 3 in the morning. I was sitting in my office, lights off, staring at a wall of charts and reports that, together, looked like a map of something inevitable. And for the first time, I felt small in front of the data. Not as an entrepreneur, not as an analyst, but as a father, a son, a human being trying to make sense of what comes after an era where everything changes faster than we can adapt. In that moment, I understood that the real question was no longer what's happening, but how each of us will respond when we finally realize that the future isn't something distant, it's something quietly seeping into the present, and most people haven't noticed yet. After that night, something in me changed. I started seeing everything differently. The conversations, the news, even the expressions on people's faces in the streets. It was as if the world had shifted slightly out of focus. Everything looked the same, but there was a subtle tension in the air, an invisible vibration that you only notice when you're truly paying attention. At first, I thought it was paranoia, but as the days passed, that feeling only grew stronger. I watched executives who were always calm and calculating suddenly act with strange urgency. People in power were postponing long-term projects, selling company shares, retreating quietly, and at the same time, absolute silence in public conversations, as if everyone was pretending nothing was happening. That's when fear stopped being abstract, because I realized that even among those who know, no one is in control. Not governments, not corporations, not economic councils. There's a structural instability that no one can stop, and everyone is just trying to look confident while the ground begins to shift beneath them. I remember a dinner with some colleagues, just weeks after that discovery. Everyone was talking about investments, new projects, the future of technology, as if we were living in another time. And I sat there, trying to join in, but my mind was elsewhere, listening to every word, every gesture, realizing how fragile it all sounded. One of them, an old friend, asked why I was so quiet. I said I was just tired, but the truth was deeper. It was the weight of knowing that maybe, just maybe, we were building castles on sand. That night when I got home, I spent hours just staring out the window. City lights, cars, buildings glowing in the distance, each one representing a life, a routine, a belief that tomorrow will look like today. And I asked myself, what happens when that belief breaks? Because the system that holds all of this together isn't made only of energy or money. It's built on trust. And trust is the kind of structure that, once cracked, never rebuilds quite the same. In the days that followed, I started spending more time with my family. Not because I wanted to escape work, but because I began to understand what truly matters. Small things, my children's laughter, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of my wife talking on the phone, suddenly carried a weight I hadn't felt in years. But along with that gratitude came something else: silent guilt. The guilt of knowing more than I wished I did, of looking at the people I love and wondering if they're ready for what's coming, not materially, but emotionally. One night, my son asked why I seemed distracted lately. He said I smiled less, that I often stared into space. And I lied. I told him it was work, that I was just worried about a big project. But inside, I wondered, how do you explain to a child that the world he knows might soon change in ways even adults can't understand? Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself I was exaggerating, that maybe I had misread the data, that maybe everything would stabilize. But every conversation, every meeting, every report only confirmed the feeling that something was quietly realigning. And that's what makes this transition so dangerous. It won't come with an announcement or a clear signal. It will unfold in the most insidious way possible, like a change in the air. Suddenly, people will start behaving differently. Institutions will act with urgency, narratives will contradict themselves, and by the time we notice, the world will already be different. The hardest part is accepting that this transformation won't be purely external. It will happen within each of us, because every collective shift begins with a change in what we believe to be real. And the truth is, many people already feel it, even if they can't explain why. They sense that something's in the air, that things don't feel quite right. It's not superstition, it's intuition, the mind detecting patterns that haven't yet reached consciousness. That's why what I'm saying here matters, because when fear is vague, it spreads like a virus, but when you understand it, it loses power. So the first step in facing what's coming isn't stockpiling resources or escaping the system, it's rebuilding clarity. Learning to see clearly, even in the noise. Over time, I've learned there are two ways to face the unknown. The first is trying to control it. The second is strengthening yourself so it doesn't destroy you. Most people choose the first, and that's understandable. It's human instinct. But the real power lies in the second, because the unknown can't be controlled. It can only be met with awareness and presence. That realization changed me. I started having deeper conversations with the people close to me, not about fear, but about purpose. I began asking what truly made them feel alive, what gave meaning to their lives if everything else disappeared. And I realized most people didn't have an answer. They were so busy keeping up with the pace of the world that they'd forgotten why they were running. I used to be the same, until I realized the only thing that truly matters when everything becomes uncertain is the quality of the human connections you've built. Friends, family, community. These are the real safety nets. So I want you to think about this. If everything predictable were to disappear, what would still hold you up? Who would you turn to? What inside you would remain standing? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're the beginning of preparation. Over time, I realized that most people don't need more information. They need more clarity. We're surrounded by data, predictions, and opinions, yet clarity has been lost in the noise. And without clarity, every kind of preparation becomes just more noise. So I started to shift my focus. Instead of trying to predict what's going to happen, I began asking a different question. How do we live consciously in a world that never stops changing? And that single question began to rearrange everything inside me. Because once you accept that control is an illusion, fear loses part of its grip. And when fear loosens, the mind starts to work again. The truth is, the most important kind of preparation isn't material, it's mental and emotional. The next few years won't be defined only by economic or political crises, but by each person's capacity to adapt without losing their humanity. And that's a skill we can learn. I discovered this by observing people who've lived through personal collapse, war, or disaster and still managed to stand tall. They all had something in common. They knew how to distinguish what was essential from what was accessory. Modern life taught us the opposite. We believe that being prepared means having resources, connections, knowledge. But in moments of true instability, what saves you isn't what you have, it's who you are. Self-control is the new luxury. Serenity is the new power. And empathy will be the most valuable currency of the future. If you want to understand what's coming, look at where human energy is being drained. Attention, time, focus, solidarity. Everything that holds society together is being fragmented. And without cohesion, people become easy to manipulate, not by force, but by distraction. I remember speaking with a psychologist who worked in humanitarian crises. She told me something I'll never forget. In every collapse, the first to fall aren't the poorest or the weakest. They're the ones who lose their sense of purpose. That stayed with me, because that's exactly what we're witnessing now on a global scale, a crisis of meaning, a widening gap between what people do and what they believe in. And that gap, that emptiness, is the true trigger of disorder. There can be no stability where there is no purpose. So if I could offer you one piece of advice, it would be this. Rebuild your sense of purpose before the world convinces you it isn't necessary. This isn't philosophy, it's survival. When the economy shakes, purpose gives you direction. When technology changes everything, purpose gives you center. When fear grows, purpose keeps you anchored. That's why, these days, I spend more time talking to people about what drives them than about what threatens them. Because fear paralyzes, but meaning moves. In recent weeks, I've been thinking a lot about community. For decades, we were taught to believe in total independence, to be self-sufficient, autonomous, untouchable. But the truth is, none of that exists outside of the collective. Every civilization that survived major transitions did so because of the human networks it built. And that's what we need to rebuild now. Networks. Networks of trust, support, and genuine exchange. Friends you can rely on. Neighbors you can collaborate with. Groups capable of functioning even without digital systems, if it ever comes to that. This isn't pessimism. It's about closing the distance between dependence and interdependence. I've learned that true preparedness isn't isolating yourself from the world. It's reconnecting to it intelligently, creating emotional and practical redundancy, knowing who to turn to, how to share resources, and how to act when confusion takes over. And above all, maintaining discernment when everyone else begins to lose it, because that's what's going to happen. In times of accelerated change, panic always comes before reorganization. And it's in that in-between, between fear and adaptation, that the future is decided. So, when chaos seems imminent, remember this: serenity is a political act. Staying calm, thinking clearly, refusing despair, that's what keeps social structure alive when everything around it starts to fragment. I'm not saying it will be easy. I'm afraid too. I still wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something enormous is shifting beneath the surface, and that we, as a species, still don't know how to handle it. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the real lesson of our time is learning to coexist with the unknown without letting it destroy our humanity. It's strange, because the more I talk to people from different fields, scientists, artists, spiritual leaders, farmers, the more I realize everyone feels the same thing. No matter the country or profession, they all talk about an invisible pressure, a feeling that we're being pushed towards something new, but no one knows exactly what it is. And maybe that's the beginning of a new collective awareness. Maybe that's the bright side of all this, the quiet awakening that happens when the old world starts to fall apart. Because every crisis has two sides, the collapse of what no longer works and the birth of what doesn't yet have a name. And that's exactly where we are now, between the end and the beginning. I know this might sound abstract, but it's not. If you look closely, you'll see it everywhere. Everything emerging now, new economies, new ways of working, new technologies, even new forms of spirituality, is trying to answer the same question. How do we live with purpose in an age of permanent uncertainty? And maybe that's the central question of the 21st century, because if we can learn to answer it no matter what happens, we'll be able to rebuild. But to do that, we have to stop chasing certainty and start building consciousness. And consciousness begins the moment you stop, observe, and ask yourself, do I really know why I believe what I believe? Are my decisions truly mine, or were they suggested to me? Is my routine a choice, or just a distraction? These questions may seem simple, but they define who will merely survive the transition and who will evolve through it. When I started writing this video, I thought my role was to warn people. But now I understand, it's not about warning, it's about awakening. Because the danger isn't what comes from outside, it's what falls asleep inside us while the world changes. For months, I was obsessed with external signals, charts, financial movements, backstage decisions. But over time, I realized the real pattern wasn't out there. It was within people, in tired eyes, in rushed conversations, in empty messages trying to fill the silence no one wants to face. The world is accelerating not only because technology demands it, but because we, as a species, are running away from something, from boredom, from solitude, from self-awareness. And the more we run, the faster everything spins. That's why time feels short. That's why anxiety has become the universal language of modern life. But what no one says is this: speed is a collective choice, and it can be stopped. Everything human begins when we pause, when we breathe, when we remember that every small decision is, in fact, a vote for the kind of world we want to build. That's the message I want to leave you with. There's no secret plan controlling everything. There's no hidden elite scripting the future. What exists is an entire civilization trying to deal with its own creation and being terrified by its reflection. We are the system. We are the market. We are the algorithm. And every time we act out of fear, we reinforce the very cycle that threatens us. But here's the good news. The opposite is also true. Every time we act with awareness, every time we slow down, listen, and connect, we break that cycle. That's what I meant when I said that September or any other month doesn't matter. What matters is the moment you decide to wake up to the reality of now. The preparation I spoke of isn't physical, it's existential. It's relearning how to think clearly in a world full of noise. It's learning to have real conversations while everyone else is shouting. It's creating small spaces of lucidity in a culture obsessed with urgency. It took me a long time to understand that hope isn't a naive feeling. Hope is a discipline. It takes practice. It takes choosing every single day to keep believing in the possibility of rebuilding, even when everything points to the opposite. And maybe that's the greatest strength a human being can have, the ability to keep imagining good while the world insists on fear. I want you to remember this. No crisis can defeat a lucid community. No collapse is final when people unite with purpose. History proves it. Every cycle, humanity reinvents itself. And almost always, reinvention begins with someone saying what no one wants to hear, that the old path is over and the new one depends on us. Maybe this video is just that, a record of this moment, a reminder that the change has already begun, and that you still have a choice in how you move through it. And if there's something you can start doing today, start small. Don't wait for a dramatic shift. Turn off the noise for a few minutes each day. Look people in the eyes. Talk without rushing. Pay attention to what the world is trying to distract you from feeling, because that's where meaning lives. Take care of what's alive, your mind, your body, the people around you, because the real future will be built by those who still know how to care. I recorded all of this because I truly believe there's still time. Time to remember what's essential. Time to rebuild trust. Time to relearn how to live calmly. And deep down, maybe that's what real preparation means. Not arming yourself against tomorrow, but opening yourself to it, with awareness and courage. If you've made it this far, it's because a part of you already senses that something is changing. And you're right. But that change doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something more real. Maybe the future isn't in grand plans, but in the small choices we repeat until they form a new kind of society. Simpler, more human, more awake. And when people ask me what I truly hope for in the years ahead, my answer is this. I hope we remember that we are more than consumers, workers, or users of systems. We are conscious beings. And when we remember that, the world starts making sense again. So don't see this message as a warning. See it as an invitation to wake up, to care, to remember, to slow down. Because in the end, true preparation for the future is this, to be fully present right now.